But he said she works very hard. And I was there every Friday night religiously. I had no life. My life was going to work. And so once he said that I was a hard worker, they called me in for an interview. And then they hired me.
Sheila, thanks so much for being on the Manufacturing Muscle podcast. We are really excited to have you on. I just remember meeting you just a few years ago and hearing your story, listening to you talk, seeing you work with all the customers and the people at the event that we were at was really inspiring. So when I thought about Manufacturing Muscle, you were one of the first people on my list that I'm like, she needs to be in my first 5 release videos. So thanks so much for being on.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I remember meeting you out in Colorado as well, and we got right on board with recruiting as many women at the event to meet each other and
We
do
did.
interviews and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. I remember I was running around. I'm like, hey, can you get on camera for like 5 minutes? I need you. You're like, probably like, who is this girl? She's like 3 feet tall, and she's asking me to go every which direction. But now we're bonded. We are good now.
Yeah, I'm 6 feet and you're a lot shorter than I am. We're definitely a good match pair for sure.
Yeah. Anybody watching, Sheila is like, what are you, like 5'10"?
I'm 6 feet tall.
You are 6 feet?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, so she's 6 feet and I'm 5 feet. So you can see how funny we were running around the event. There was an AMT event in Colorado together. People were probably like, what is happening there? But anyway, thanks so much for being on. I'm really excited for this conversation, and I think all of our listeners are going to be really excited. You have such an inspiring story. Before we get into that and kind of how you got into manufacturing and all the things we want to talk about, why don't you tell us about yourself, your educational path, and kind of a brief story of how you got here.
Okay, cool. All right, my name is Sheila Guay, and I work for a company called MP Systems. We're based out of East Granby, Connecticut, and we manufacture and sell high-pressure coolant pumps, mist collectors, oil skimmers, coolant chillers, washdown guns, and we've really recently put a big emphasis on filtration. And I have been with MP since November of 2016. 2016 I started, so we're coming on 7 years. Hopefully that math adds up because I'm pretty sure I started in 2016.
Okay.
And when I started with them, I didn't know what a CNC machine was. It was a major learning curve for me, but it really has been a great experience. I was definitely nervous at first, thinking, what am I actually doing? Why am I doing this? But it turned out to be great. So I went to school I grew up in Massachusetts. I still live in Massachusetts. And I went to school for equine business management, which is essentially managing and running a horse farm. I went to Johnson & Wales in Providence, Rhode Island. I graduated in 2005. And at that point, I had done an internship as well at a farm in Massachusetts with a lady named Jean DeGutis. And the name of the farm was Equitation Unlimited. I did an internship with her for a year, actually working on the horse farm, which I really, really enjoyed. So when I graduated in 2005, I really wanted to continue trying to work with horses because that's what I went to school for. So I moved back home from Rhode Island, and I ended up, one of my friends, she owned a bar in town, a local bar. And I live in a small town, so it's a nice bar, but it is not the most glamorous establishment. And I started working there in 2006. And I was there for a total of 10 years at this bar.
For 10 years?
Yeah, so I started out there, and then I had a stint where I lived in Kentucky and Tennessee for a year total, and I would still come back and help with the bar when they needed me, or if I was home, I would work a couple shifts. But after that year, I did come home from Kentucky and Tennessee, I forget, maybe 2014, and then I started running the bar full-time at that point.
Wow. Okay, so one of the things that I really want to talk about is that transition from working in the bar doing what you're doing there to then somehow getting in sales. And it's funny because I do hear a lot of people say, like, the best salespeople are the ones from the service industry. They're waitresses, and that's how you develop those skills and all of that. So why don't we kind of start there? And when you started at the restaurant, the skills that you felt like you were building there, what you were dealing with there, and then kind of what made you get out and think about other careers.
Okay. Yeah. So all of sales, which we'll get into later, is, I think, a lot related to people and how you can talk to people. And when you're in a restaurant, working at a restaurant, that's literally what you're doing, is you are dealing with people from the time you clock in to the time you leave. So that bar was open from 4 p.m. until 2 a.m. And those are my hours. So as you can imagine, that was very draining. But I learned very fast on how to deal with people and all sorts of people. And then they're also sometimes intoxicated. So as you can imagine, you just generate all of these skills on how to deal with people. And I also, from the bar, got very thick skin. I mean, I still can get upset about things, or sad, but for the most part, people, if somebody says something to me, I'm like, I've been called worse. So you're not hurting my feelings, you are not intimidating me. And it definitely taught me to be assertive, which I think is very important in any industry that you're in. I see people online posting about how it's hard for them to say no to somebody. And everybody has things that are hard for them or more difficult, but I just can't imagine that. For me, it's like a drunk person, they think they are an expert negotiator. And what they're trying.
Almighty, you're a few drinks in, you are like, ain't nobody telling you no, other than Sheila.
The answer to what they want is no. So you just learn how to say no. You shut someone off, and then they're trying to convince you that it's time for them to have another drink. It's just no, no, no. And until you learn to really be assertive in any career, I think that it's easier for people to take advantage of you, either intentionally or unintentionally, And that was one thing I definitely learned. And just how to deal with people, meaning if somebody says to me, I don't agree with what you said, or I can't think of a good example. I'll think of an example of shutting someone off. I feel like you've had enough to drink. I don't feel comfortable serving you anymore. Instead of, you've had too much to drink. You are drunk. You can't drink here. It's completely different when you have a conversation and maybe put the blame on yourself, even if it's not your fault. But you just learn better methods of communicating with people the more time you spend out in the public. So I was there for 10 years, and I decided that I didn't want to work till 4 a.m. anymore. And I thought that maybe there would be some other opportunities out there for me. So I got my resume together, and I went on Indeed, and I applied for this job at MP Systems. And the sales hiring manager, my boss, he's still my boss, Kermit Wright, he saw that I worked at this specific bar restaurant, and he knew that Mike Sayers was our general manager at the time. He's now the president. But he knew that he would come in there like on a Friday night for a burger and a beer. And so he asked him, he said, do you know this girl? He said, I know her. He said, she looks like she hates her job, which I did. Yeah, I was like at that point the bartender with a very bad attitude. I had been soured. But he said she works very hard. And I was there every Friday night religiously. I had no life. My life was going to work. And so once he said that I was a hard worker, they called me in for an interview. And then they hired me.
Oh my gosh. Talk about taking a chance on someone. Talk
Right?
about believing in yourself, but kind of like what you were saying when you were talking about learning how to be assertive and things like that. Like sometimes you have to learn like tough lessons or like ways to develop your skills like the hard way. And like if you didn't have that restaurant experience where you like got assertive and learned how to work with people, like who knows if the opportunity ever would have like came about, So I think it's like really empowering for anyone that may be listening, whether you're in high school and you like sales, think about getting into the service industry, or say you're someone that like Kermit that is looking to hire people.
And he's able to think outside the box and see, navigate, maybe she was in a bar, but what skills does she have from there that she could bring here? And, I'm thankful that they took the time to think about that and consider it.
Yeah, that's really important, and that was such a huge opportunity for you. Like, yes, I can get out of the bar and do all these things, and you had those skills, and you pay attention, and you do all the right things to get where you
Hmm.
are. So now you're at MP Systems. You've been working there for how you said since 2016, right?
Yeah, I think so. I know for sure we're coming on 7 years.
All right. So we're close to that. So how has your role been at MP System? Oh my gosh, I cannot talk today. How has your role been and changed at MP Systems, and what was it like getting into the industry, trying to adjust to everything?
If I remember correctly, when they hired me, they were looking for an account manager, and I was going to take on some of the accounts that we already had within our organization. That's pretty much how anyone would start, I think, in a new position. But I seem to remember they weren't even really sure uh, what I was going to do exactly when I got there. And when I was there, I started shadowing under Kermit. If Kermit got a call, I would take the call with him. I would make quotes with him. And I learned that way how to do my job. And the good thing about MP Systems is that we're in East Granby, Connecticut, but in our building, I go into the office every day if I'm not traveling. Right now I'm in Dallas because I had to go to a customer's open house. But we're all there in that building, the engineers, contracts, shipping, everybody is there. So if I get a call from a customer asking me a technical question that I don't know the answer to, I can walk right out to the floor and ask the person who designed that product. So when you buy something from MP, and it's made a huge difference in my ability to sell the product, we're all there. And Mike Sayers, who's our president, MP Systems stands for Michael Paul Sayers. He had to go register the business when he opened it, and he still didn't have a name while he was driving
Hey,
there.
no way.
So he said that he thought of his initials, MP Systems. But he started building this product in his garage, and he's in that office with us every day when he's not traveling. And he's really like the mastermind behind high pressure coolant. I don't think, he knows what everything
Yeah.
there is to know about high pressure, but that resource is amazing. And they would just teach me so much. So it's really been a lot of learning, but it's been interesting, and I've really enjoyed it. And now I still have the same job title. I always say at my next review I'm going to ask to be senior account manager, because
Yeah, add a little senior to the front of that title.
because I've been there the longest, but I always forget. So I still have the same job title, but I'm definitely doing a lot more independently now.
That is awesome. So I do want to take a pause for 1 second, because you talked about how Mike started building these systems in his garage. And so it's like he took a chance on himself, took a chance on what he had. You can kind of see how this story continues to play out. And I always talk about, and I'll probably say it in every podcast, that manufacturing is kind of designed for advancement. Mike came up with this product. He said this would be a great idea, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of a sudden you guys are where you are now. And
Yeah.
he's grown exponentially. And then wanted to go to school to own a horse farm. Then you got into the restaurant industry, and now you're here, and now you're growing a lot. It's like that trend that I think a lot of people don't know about. You can start somewhere and end up somewhere else. You could be the owner of a company. You could be a senior account manager. You could grow into all these different areas. But I can definitely attest to, having all those people around you. Because I remember when I got at the HEH group, and I got into marketing. I mean, when you're in marketing, even though you're not selling the product, you have to know what it is so you can market it properly. You know what I'm saying? So I would go out on the floor. I'd be, hey, John, can you tell me this? Or Mike, can you help me with this? Or, my dad or Bob or Jim Haggerty, anybody. I'm like, somebody help me understand what's going on, because it really is a foreign language, and I think that's something that everybody talks about when they get into the industry. It's like you don't grow up really learning about mills and lathes and high pressure coolant and XYZ, whatever, because that's not really in anywhere of life, but it's what gives us the ability to do everything that we do. I mean, without manufacturing, without those crazy terms and the foreign language and people going from nothing to something, we wouldn't have laptops and computers and phones and airplanes and cars, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, having that support system helps you learn quicker and lets you fall back on something when you need it.
Yeah, and they're really good about teaching somebody who's brand new. I remember the first time Mike tried to explain to me what an M code was. I was just looking at him, and he goes, okay, I have a flashlight. I turn it on. M code on. High pressure coolant on. I'm like, okay. He goes, I want to shut it off. I push the button. I'm like, okay, I totally get this now.
You're like, perfect, great visual.
Yeah. Take it back to a notch that somebody who's not technical, who doesn't know what a CNC machine is, and explain it. And, I'm sure that's got to be not hard, but he's so intelligent. And then to be trying to explain something so basic, but he takes the time, he's invested in it, and they're all like that. They are all like that. And it has paid off for them because they've had some really good people that come to work every day and value that kind of thing and continue to come to work and continue to do a good job because they want to.
Well, I think that's a really great point because we need more companies like that. Sure, we know manufacturing's trending in a positive direction and people are starting to care more about these things and we're seeing the workforce challenges and things like that. But to be able to sit here as an employee, not anything for MP Systems, just coming on a podcast, being able to talk like that about the company that you work for they should be super proud of that. You should be really proud of that. And anyone listening that is in charge of managing people or, hiring people, take this information in because Sheila, it's easy to know. It's easy to see. You hear, you talk about, you have so much excitement when you talk about MP Systems. People want to work for you. They want to do a good job for you. So take your time and give them that little bit of information that they need. I know a lot of people spent a lot of time on me to help me get where I am and grow, and then the same for you. And that goes a really long way for a lot of different things.
Yeah, I feel really invested in MP, and I feel really committed to them because of what they've done for me. And I've done a lot too. Like, this is not a one-sided thing, and sometimes people are like, you're discrediting what you do. And I'm like, that's not what I'm trying to say. They've been very good to me, and now I feel committed to them in a good way. We have a good relationship. There's so much to learn. I know they're going to teach it to me if I ask, or it'll be provided to me. And it really has made a big difference for me working there.
All right, so let's get into your sales career. So starting off, why don't you just talk about your experience getting into sales? You kind of touched on it a little bit, learning from the people in the building and things like that. But what about learning? You already had the skill of learning how to deal with people, but how did you apply that to building relationships with customers?
Well, in the process of all this, 2019, I retired my show horse. So when I compete with my horse, it's really... I didn't win, don't get me wrong. There was no winning going on. But I'm going to make this sound like it's a big deal. I don't want anyone to think it was exceptional.
Don't worry, we're going to get into the horses too, so everybody's going to know.
He's basically a full-time athlete. So that was taking up a lot of my time. And I loved it. But when I finished, I retired him. He was older. In 2019, I pursued my master's, and I went online to Bay Path University, and I got a master's in leadership and negotiation, and that is mainly was psychology classes. So even though the name of this program was leadership and negotiation, it could have been called how to sell pumps at MP Systems, because it was all psychology, how to identify people, how to identify their personalities, how to find out what they want. If someone's trying to buy something from you, they want something. So you need to find out what they need so that you can hit on that topic to really hit it home and sell it to this person. And one of the things that really went a long ways for me in that program was the 6 principles of persuasion. Have you ever heard of that?
I heard about it from when you told me about it when we initially met, but let's talk about that more. I want people, when they're listening, to be able to take something away, and I think you're going down a really good path, so tell me.
Yeah, so I wrote down the name of one of the books. There's many books on this, and if you went on YouTube, there'd probably be 4 million videos, but Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini, and maybe you could put a note of the name of the author or something. I can't pronounce his last name. But the 6 principles of persuasion are liking, which means if you like someone, you are more likely to buy something from them. So there's that. And then there's reciprocity, which is the inclination that if somebody does something for you, you're more inclined to do something for them. So you can build a relationship with people. We made this new brochure. Would you mind checking it out and see what you think? You can start on a small basis of getting people to say yes to you. Yes, I'm happy to read that brochure. Instead of, do you want to buy this tower of power that costs XYZ? You don't start
Right.
with the big thing. You start building a relationship on a small scale. The next one is scarcity, which is a tendency if something is scarce, people are more inclined to want to buy it, which is, like if there's only 3 of something left, which we don't typically have, so that one doesn't really apply. Authority is a huge one for us. If you're considered to be the expert on something, people are more inclined to do it. So they say, for example, physical therapy. If you're at your physical therapist and they've done so many studies on this. If your physical therapist has 15 framed awards of physical therapist of the year, people are like way more likely to do the recommended exercises than a physical therapist that doesn't have any of the awards, because they don't see them. They're not even aware of this, but they don't see them as much of the authority.
It's like happening back here and you don't even
Unconsciously. Yeah. So,
okay.
and like I mentioned with Mike, like he knows so much about high pressure, and a lot of people know that. So we do kind of get considered to be experts on it, and people are more likely to come to us and just be like, Sheila, what do I do here? I don't sell high pressure pumps. This is my first time selling a high pressure pump. How can you help me? And they know they're going to get the answer from us. And then consistency and commitment. People like to do the same thing over and over again. Same thing with if someone buys a Ford
They're more likely
for
to
4
buy
trips
it.
in a row, they're probably not going to go to Chevy to buy the 5th one. And then consensus, social proof, just other people are doing it kind of thing. But reading that book and really studying that, and mostly the liking, getting people to like you in an authentic way is really a big deal.
Those
That's
are
what I found.
those are super insightful, and if you could send me kind of a link or like the full title of that book and everything, maybe we'll
Yeah,
throw a picture
definitely.
up on the screen, but just so anyone listening, if they're interested in reading it, they can, because when you think about some of those things, like I'm sitting here kind of listening, taking it in, it really is like day-to-day stuff. Like, how do you become friends with somebody? You become friends with somebody because you start a conversation and you start taking interest in what they do, they start taking interest in what you do, and all of a sudden you kind of start like that, the liking each other. And then when you have that, I mean, obviously as a friend standpoint, there's no expertise involved, but when you have that backing and Mike and everybody knows what they're talking about and all that, it builds the trust in the customer. That
100%.
we can trust this company, that they're going to provide us with the right solution.
One other thing I was going to say is that when I first started and I started learning about this kind of stuff, and people buy from people they like I said, but I was wondering, I work with all men, mostly men, and some of them are close to retirement age. What am I possibly going to have in common with them? That was a concern of mine. But
Okay.
everybody has an interest and everybody has a hobby, and some people have daughters my age, or their son's getting married and have a daughter. There's always something you can find in common with somebody. And it doesn't even have to be related to manufacturing. You just need to find something that you have in common with this person, and then go from there and just build a genuine relationship with them.
I think that's one thing. So I want to ask you, can you like spew off a few ways, like say scenario, you walk in to a new customer. Are there things that you're looking for? Are there words you're looking for them to say? Are there pictures on the wall? Like, what are some things that a salesperson could walk in and go, boom, 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 these are the things that I'm looking for. These are the things I'm trying to bring up to start that relationship.
There's different kind of personalities. So if I ended up in a conversation, if I'm trying to sell something to somebody who is super technical, I really struggle, because they really only want to talk about how this thing works and how it's communicating with the machine. And that's where I get that's not my strength. We have engineers. If I go into a customer, I'll send a group text to Mike Sayers and then 2 other people, and I'll say, I'm going in. If I call, answer the phone, and they will always answer. So I know I always have that technical backup if I need it in a conversation with someone like that. But a lot of people, like you're saying, they'll have pictures on their desk. They'll just start saying, for example, oh, one time my band was playing here, and all that kind of stuff. But you don't want it to be distracting or that you can't stay on the subject. But usually, like if I'm trying to sell filtration and we have a new cyclonic unit, the CDR, it filters 80 gallons per minute. Like if someone's trying to run lights out, cast iron, aluminum, and they have a bank of horizontals with filtering chip conveyors, I'll be like, are those coolant tanks dirty? And usually they're like, They are, so it's just identifying something that could be a possibility. And I'll say, well, let's go over there and look at the coolant tank. They're like, you want to look at the coolant tank? I'm like, heck yeah, I want to look at the coolant tank. So it's just speaking up. People like when other people speak up, can carry on a conversation, and they're going to end up saying something that you can then continue on and build a relationship off of.
So what would be like some advice? I know, we come into the industry, might not know a lot. Most people don't. And then you got to go sell something. I hear a lot of people saying, like you just said, I can sell it, but when it gets into the technical side, I got people. How do you kind of get over that confidence barrier? Like, okay, I might not know everything, but I know I can sell it. Like, how do you just lean on your people and say, I'm going to go and do this? Because I feel a lot of people struggle with that. They think they have to be technical experts, but they don't know how to get the confidence to separate, like, okay, I'm going to sell this, and I'll lean on the people that I need to.
So it's funny you ask that, because every time somebody says I'm a salesperson, it kind of catches me off guard, as crazy as that sounds, because when I get up in the morning, I don't think that I'm a salesperson. So I really just, when I applied for my job, I didn't even know what high pressure coolant was. And I remember, because I wanted to be able to ask intelligent questions at my interview, I'm Googling high pressure to look it up. And then I'm at the interview and I said, I really want to do this job, but I want to know that I need you guys to tell me that I'm selling a good product to people. I didn't even know what it was. I'm like, but I don't want to sell somebody something that's not good. I just don't want to do that to people. And they're like, we promise you, we're behind this product, we service. So I really think of being a salesperson as offering someone something of value. So it sells itself. High pressure coolant, for the most part, sells itself. I'm probably like getting myself fired from my job, saying I'm irrelevant right now. But I never want to push something onto somebody. When somebody buys something from me, it's because I helped them with my team to understand how this thing works and what value it's going to give them. We had a lady in marketing, and she always said, I could never be a salesperson. And it's funny, because I would have said the exact same thing if you asked me that. But it's really, they have this machine, they want to do this. Oh, sure, we can do that, And as far as not being the most technical person, at MP, we design all of our products. So the design engineer is on site, and they are going to help me with any questions that I have. And really, when my customers come to me, the distributor salespeople, they want an answer. They don't necessarily care if I'm the person that can give it to them. If it doesn't come right out of my mouth and I say, I need to go ask somebody about this, but I'm going to get back to you, I get back to them very quickly, and they are always satisfied with the answer. There's never been a case where they've asked me a question and then they know I got the answer from someone else, and so then the next time they just called that person. That's not what happens. They always still come back to me, and when I ask the question, hopefully I can remember that for the next time and I don't have to ask, but that's not always the case. But we have a MP promise, where if you call MP on our support line MP team, you're going to be speaking with an engineer within 2 minutes in troubleshooting your problem. So there's never, maybe we have some new customers and they're not really sure how our business model works, but when it comes down to why we come into that building every day, it is to make sure our customers are happy and that they have the right product and that we're going to keep it up and running for them. So really, like, I don't think of it as like, I'm a salesperson. That's not how we operate. The product really sells itself, and I feel like we facilitate people and help them get the right thing. But as far as the pressure of, if I was like, I could have never been a salesperson. No, if I thought that, I probably wouldn't have taken the job, but it kind of organically develops itself that when you become the authority or an expert or know what you're talking about, people are more inclined to buy from you.
Yeah, I mean, all that makes perfect sense. I think that information is definitely going to be useful to anybody listening, whether it's just with relationship building in general, or maybe you are in sales, you're looking to get into sales, or any other possibilities that may be there. But let's jump into, so with your customers, with new customers. I know I hear a lot of people talk, and inside our organization as well, with prospecting. Prospecting changed a lot, I know, since COVID, and we couldn't go and see customers, and everything was Zoom and this and that. Is there anything that you learned, from COVID that you still apply now? And how do you take on the prospecting role, finding new customers, and kind of breaking down that initial barrier and letting to get into their shops?
So typically my business model is that I work through machine tool distributors. So
Okay.
I'm quoting my product through the person who's selling the machine tool. So when I prospect, normally I'm prospecting different distributors. My role when I first started, I didn't do any prospecting. I had the accounts that I had, and MP was growing. We're still growing, so it wasn't like there was an urgency to prospect. So I was in Kansas one time, and I decided that I was going to try prospecting. So I went on Google, and I Googled machine tool distributor near me, went in there, and as luck would have it, they bought a pump. And then I'm like,
God.
oh no, I'm going to have to prospect everywhere I go.
You're like, I'm about to end up in inside sales. Oh, no.
What just happened? But it really is just the ability to talk to people. And I know it's hard. I know it can be intimidating to knock on a door and make a conversation with someone, but that's been a big part of it. And COVID really changed, I thought, how we worked with a team internally within our organization. That was a lot of dynamic that changed for us, because usually we were all in the sales office together, and if so-and-so said such and such, we would just hear it. There didn't have to be a meeting. There didn't have to be an email. We really had to take a step back and communicate better as a team, just because we weren't all around each other. But how my job works is really I'm in the office, or I'm doing sales calls with my guys if they need them, or women, and I go to a lot of open houses. So
Okay.
there was no open houses during COVID, so I didn't have that opportunity to connect with everybody. And you had to work at it, because you felt like people were dropping off, and it's like, are they upset? Did I do something? Did they switch to the competitor? But it was really just they can't leave their house.
Just the time, yeah. Yeah, you're like, well, I can't buy anything, I can't leave, so.
Yeah. So, there's just those different dynamics you had to sort out and find ways to have. I do better connecting with people in person. Once I meet somebody in person, I just feel more connected to them. I feel more comfortable calling them. Not just they already know who I am, but it definitely was a work in progress during COVID.
I think you really hit the nail on the head. You talked about the six psychologies of sales and all of that, and talking about different ways to build relationships with customers and all of that. But it sounds like, at the end of the day, when it comes to that confidence component that you need, what you said about you're not a salesman, you're trying to provide somebody with a solution that's valuable to their shop. That mindset's really gotta be. If you could really get yourself there, I feel like you don't feel like you're annoyance. You feel like you could call twice. You feel like you could leave, 10, 20 voicemails in the emails and show up if you believe in your product and you believe that it's a value to somebody.
100%. That's made a big difference for us.
But I want to switch over to, you didn't know necessarily what manufacturing was before you got into it, or maybe you did. Was there any experience that you had with manufacturing? I mean, it was you wanted to go into horses, so not quite on your mind.
That's right. So when I was like 14, 15, 16, my father was a plant manager at a company called Monarch Plastics. They were in Granby, Connecticut, and he did injection press molding machines, ABS and PVC, plastic pipe and fittings. So I worked there with him that was my childhood job. Was working
Did you
there.
really?
Yeah, and my dad, whenever I complain about anything work related, like I don't want to go to work today, or blah, 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 I'd rather be at the beach. He's like, I worked third shift running he had to open and close the door manually on this thing and hit the mold out with a hammer on third shift for $4 an hour. So he's like, I don't want to hear it.
Go to work.
Every time I start, he's like, don't even.
Yeah,
But,
nice comment, Sheila. Go to work.
yeah, so I worked with him in that industry until I went to high school, or through high school probably. But it never was something that I thought I wanted to do when I was there working with him. All I really saw was how hard he worked and how committed he was to his job. And it was extra money for me, but at the time it was definitely not something that I thought I would ever get into.
It's interesting because so my great grandpa worked at Cleveland to Twist and Drill, which I don't even know that they're even a company anymore. And then my grandpa worked in sales at Mach and Merriweather, which was a big distribution company. And then him and his partner Eddie Mach started Mach and Eichele, which is one of the companies in the AGH group now.
Hmm.
But I kind of grew up around manufacturing, but it was never like I was never like, yeah, kind of like how you're saying, like you grew up around it, you're involved in it, but you were never like, yeah, I want to get into it. And
Hmm.
a lot, I'll talk to students and stuff like that, and they'll say, well, my mom said, just like how you're saying, her dad went to the shop and he worked for $5 an hour and it was the hardest work he ever done and this and that. So then the parents are like, why would you want to get into that? And then to you, you're like, huh, no way, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So I feel like over time, manufacturing has developed this perception where people don't want to go into it because of what it used to be
Hmm.
versus starting to learn what it is now, which is, I feel is very different. I mean, I've only been in the industry for, roughly 3 years now, but kind of growing up in it and around it and knowing what it used to be and knowing what it is now. I mean, it is very different.
There's a lot of shops now that design their building around attracting employees. So they
Really?
design it so that it's not as loud in there from the machines. The floors don't make you as stiff from standing on them. The air conditioning, all different kinds of stuff. Because you're right, sometimes it has a reputation of what it was or a idea people have in their head, and they have trouble getting someone who maybe just came off of a college program with a degree, and they're trying to find those kind of people too as well to be engineers and salespeople. So they've really tried to change around how they do some stuff in some businesses. I've,
Yeah, it definitely seems as if it's trending in that direction. Companies are they're seeing the
mhm.
skill gap and they're seeing the hiring challenges that they're having. And I mean, I always say, and my dad and I always talk about, I feel like manufacturing's biggest competitor is our perception and exposure. The perception
Mhm.
of the industry is one thing, and then people not knowing about it is a separate thing. So and I always say this as well, whatever we can do from a small standpoint, a large standpoint, can OEMs help, can distributors help, can we bring in teachers and students, what can we do to help morph that perception into what the reality is today? And yeah, there is definitely some shops, I mean, there's totally some shops that I've been into that, definitely need some updating and whatever, but I would say most of them, I mean, you've been in more shops than I have, but a lot of the shops I've been in are trending in that direction of trying to make it an attractive work environment
Mhm.
for the younger generation, or even just people in their 20s that might be waitresses and working in bars or car salesmen, or, maybe you're in fashion and you like to put things together, so in engineering, but to make it an environment that people are like excited to get into.
Mhm.
Because once you learn it, it is really exciting. But when you hear the word manufacturing, you're like, mm,
Yeah, I
you know,
agree with you. And when I applied, I was skeptical. I was so desperate to get out of my other job that I was just whatever. Let's give it a try, And
yeah.
I'm not even really a big risk taker like that. That's just how much I was ready to move on to something else. But yeah, manufacturing and being a female, it's kind of was not something I thought I would. If you asked me before I applied for that job if I would work in manufacturing, I would have just been, no, I don't foresee myself doing that. I literally fell into it by chance, and it's been great, but I do feel like we need to find a way to get it out in front of people more that are not aware of it.
Hmm.
And
What do you? Keep going. Go ahead.
it's funny because I was at my doctor's one time and she asked me what I do, and I felt like I explained it very basic, and she's like, that sounds confusing. And I was like, what? And I'm not insulting her, but just like some of the stuff that we say or the terms we use
Yes.
might just people, what are you talking about?
Okay, I have the funniest story that perfectly relates to that. None of my friends know what I do.
None of mine either.
None. I will have, like on Instagram or whatever, there'll be like reels of like people talking about things. Just a few days ago, my one friend, he had sent me this reel, and it was like, I say, this is my best friend, but I have no idea what they do. She said she went on vacation. Who's paying her to go on vacation? I don't know. Where does she even work? I don't even know what it's called. And what is it called? I don't even know what they do. And it was going on like, it was hilarious. I'm going to have to find it and send it to you. But it's funny because, yeah, it's almost like we need to find a way to simplify what we do in a few words that people understand and they think is cool. If we can get those two things in one sentence, whew, we would be winning. That would be a big W for the industry.
Manufacturing would be flooded with people.
Yes. Now, what do you think? What do you think could be done? So let's say, even if you take this from a perspective where you were younger, trying to get into college, or maybe even just now, what's on the small scale you think someone or yourself or anybody can do in manufacturing to help bring that exposure? And then on a big scale, let's say money doesn't exist, no idea is too crazy. What do you think are small scale and big scale that can make
So at MP, right before COVID hit, we had talked about we were going to do specifically Bring Your Daughter to Work Day, but we turned it into Bring Your Kid to Work Day. And we were going to bring in employees' children and have different little stations where they went in the back with Mike and they learned about something more technical, and then they came in the front and they helped the people in contracts send an invoice or answer a phone call or even just transfer it over to the engineers, and just have them go around for the day and see different aspects of what we do. And I think all of that's important, and we really should start trying to pursue that again now that we can have people back in the building.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and it was going to be fun.
Yeah, and you're getting your people. I mean, I've heard somebody say this before. It's like, it doesn't always have to be the biggest reach. It can be the people right in your circle. You have a friend that's maybe looking for a job. Hey, what about manufacturing? But yeah, bring your kid. Then you can have your kid there, and your kid can see what you can do and try and, yeah, that's a great idea. I like that one.
And another thing that Mike does, which I'm not sure of all the details on it, but he does an internship program with kids from our local high schools in the area. And they'll come for half a day or whatever the requirement is, and they'll work at MP and get more familiar with the industry. And if I've said to him before, it didn't work out with this one person, but I knew someone that said he wanted to be a mechanical engineer, and I asked Mike if he could come in for the day. He's, of course, bring him in. Not necessarily for us to recruit him, but for him to just have an opportunity to explore what he thinks he wants to do. But on a big scale, I don't even know where I would begin with that. I
know, right? It's a big thought.
Yeah, it just getting people more. I think, do I find a machine tool to be the most interesting thing in the world? I do not. But the stuff they can make on there is so cool. I mean, and anybody could be intrigued by that. And so, more of showing that kind of stuff and just what we can come up with and what we make, because I don't think that everybody understands that everything around them has been manufactured.
Yeah.
And so it's not as intriguing when you're just seeing these things in your normal life. But if you sat down and saw how it was made and how many people put time into making that, even a door handle, so your hand fits on it, the key works right, all that kind of stuff is interesting.
You're right. That's actually a really good angle where, you see a box, you see a CNC machine, and you're like, what's that? Cool. But when you see what comes off of it,
exactly.
When you see that tiny little dental drill that was just in your mouth 2 weeks ago getting your teeth cleaned, you're like, no way. And the big aerospace parts, and even sometimes the machine itself, when you're looking at it, you're like, what the heck? But when you are watching it machine apart, you're like, you see it go from, billet to a part that's going into a car or something, and you're like amazed, and that process, showing people that, putting a part in front of them that's a really cool aerospace part and say, how do you think that was made? This is how it was made, and these are the back steps that had to happen. An OEM had to build it, and then after they built it, a distributor had to find a customer. So there's sales, there's engineering involved, there's marketing involved, there's project management involved. There's so many different people that touched it to get to where it's at. And I think that's another thing that a lot of people, need to learn. It's not just being a machinist. Yeah, we need machinists and we need quality operators, but we also need people that are willing to sell the products and people that are willing to market them and grow and manage people and be leaders, things like that as well. So yeah, those are both two really good things.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyone listening, those two ones from the internships and the bringing your kid to work day, I like that.
Yeah, we gotta restart bring your kid to work day. I'm gonna bring that up on Monday when I get back in the office. They're gonna be like, Sheila's back.
We're gonna at Kermit like 75 times in this podcast. So
Who gave them a microphone?
can you stop the podcast? So with kids, bringing kids into the workforce, we know it can be challenging. And I was doing some research, a few days ago, and just learning about the unemployment rate in youth, which sounds kind of weird, but the unemployment rate for youth, if I believe, is 15 to 24 is considered youth employment. And during COVID, it like spiked. I mean, it was around like 13, 14%, super high. And then now we're sitting at around like 9-ish, mid 9s. And then prior to COVID, we were in the low 8s. And so we're seeing kind of kids maybe not wanting to work as much. I don't know what it is. Is it a parent thing? Is it a kid thing? Is it we're just not producing enough people in the world? I mean, we used to have, roughly 4 kids per family, and now we're down to like 1.8, 1 to 2 kids a family. So those things are interesting to think about, but I just want to get your take on, what would you be your advice to, a young person that might be listening to this that's 15, 16, just wants to play video games, just wants to do sports. What's the benefits of really getting down and working from a young age?
Yeah, so I don't have any children, so I don't want anyone to think I'm they're like, kids would never do that. She doesn't know what she's talking about, because I don't have kids, so I'm not going to say I'm an expert, but I grew up watching my dad work, and he worked really hard. And I remember we had a snowstorm one time, and he could not get out of the driveway, and he shoveled his way out. And we're like, your work's not even going to be open by the time you get there. Like, there's a massive snowstorm. But we were always outside, and we were always doing something. I always had a pony, and we were always out in the barn, and I always had to take care of that pony. And I think that my parents unintentionally, well, it probably was their intention, but they taught me to work hard. I remember my brother's chore was he always had to get firewood. And every night, he would complain about having to go get firewood, and I don't remember him ever not having to get it. I mean, my parents were persistent that, we had to be accountable for something, really. And I think that finding a hobby for kids where they have to be accountable makes a big difference. For example, horses. And I know horses are expensive, and everybody can't go run out and buy their kid a horse to teach them to be a decent human being. But if you don't feed that horse, if you don't clean its stall, if you don't practice every day, then it's not going to go somewhere. And the thing about phones, and I go on my phone more than I should, I think we all do, but especially with kids, I think that it limits their imagination a lot, because you're just looking at stuff. It's just appearing in front of you. And I remember playing outside with my brother and we would just make up games, and we would play them for hours. And that kind of stuff, like looking back at it, I think that has a lot to do with kids nowadays. My parents, they recently hired some kids that lived on the street to stack some firewood, and there was a negotiation process in the beginning of, what are we going to get paid? And it was fine. But then the kids realized that the stacking of the firewood was very hard work, and that they hadn't asked for enough money for the amount of time it was going to pay. They were going to be there. And they said they wanted to get paid by the job, but really they should have said by the hour. And it was turned into a thing, and my dad got frustrated with it, and he's not going to rehire them. But we would have just done it for free or whatever. Like, we were always outside, and we were always doing something.
Firewood, pick the weeds.
Yeah. I think times are different, and it's easier to sit on your cell phone in the house than it is to go outside and build a fort. It's just easier. Yeah. And I think that that's a lot of it too, is just the access to something that's easier and keeps them thinking about something. And I think that a lot of times too, people, because of their phones, have a hard time sitting with their own thoughts, but that's a whole other thing. But being outside, doing stuff, and learning the way things work when you're outside doing that kind of stuff, you kind of can be inclined towards more of a manufacturing thought process.
No, I think you bring up a lot of great points. I mean, I don't have kids either. I coach, so I see a lot of kids. I've coached for I don't even know, since I've been 13, so 11 years now. And you just kind of see the trend of kind of where things are going. And hard work is always going to translate to some type of success, right? And I think we're losing that sense of wanting people to have that work hard, be tough, get through it, push mentality, and we're seeing it. I mean, we even see it from the sports perspective where there's a ton of kids having mind blocks now where they don't want to throw tumbling skills and things like that. When I was when I was young in my career and, gymnastics and stuff, that wasn't the thing. I mean, kids were not, mentally, challenged with tumbling. It didn't scare them, none of that. But I do think between phones and, kids not maybe having the responsibilities that they used to and things like that, it's kind of morphing into something else. But again, we're not parents, but we both work hard and we both know what we did to get there, and we both know people that worked hard and what they did to get where they are, and we can only attest to that. And there's no, my dad always says there's no coincidence if there's a trend. And if all you're seeing is people working hard and getting down and doing what needs to be done, and they end up, being in a place, in a spot that they love and they can provide for their families, then all you can do is predict the future by the past. And just applying that same method,
I remember growing up, my parents, they didn't have a lot of money. My mom said when they first met, like, they would be doing, like, random things for people for $50 on a Friday night, like, to make some extra money. And but I saw how hard they worked. So if they're working that hard and we're barely getting by, like, and my parents provided me with a great childhood, but I just knew that you had to work hard. There was no way around the thought process of, if I want to have a horse when I grow up, or I want to have my own place, I need to work hard at whatever I'm doing. I have to work hard. And my dad, I remember in his office at Monarch Classic, he had a sign that said, "When the going gets tough, the tough get going."
Tough get going.
Yeah, so like, if things got hard, my dad was like, "We're not quitting. We're gonna work twice as hard." I'm like, ah!
Oh, I think our dads might have secretly grown up together and we didn't know it, because my dad tells us all the time, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm the tough, so I'm about to get going, Dad. He says that. I can't wait till he listens to this, because he is going to die when he hears you say that. That is awesome. That is the note that we are gonna end on. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. If you are, say you're in your 20s, if you're in your teens, if you're looking to get into sales, listen to this podcast. It's awesome. Sheila provides so much insight on relationship building, and even if you are currently in sales, you can certainly learn, something from what Sheila talked about today. And if you are, in the service industry and you're looking to grow your career, take a chance on yourself, show some interest, and someone will take a chance on you. If you're working at a restaurant, odds are you got relationship skills and you can make a really good career for yourself, just like, Sheila.
You have to be hardworking, have a good attitude, and be teachable, and you could really get any job you wanted. Because if you're teachable, the people who are the expert are willing to teach you how to do it. And if you have a good attitude, they'll teach you. And if you work hard, I mean, those are really the three things.
Yeah, that's the common denominator. So before we close this out, I want to end each podcast with what I'm calling our max out questions. When you're at the gym, you can max out, and I love the gym, so I'm always doing stuff like that. But the three questions, I'll throw them at you one at a time. But the first one is, what is one lesson in life that you had to learn the hard way?
That regardless of what you do, you're going to have disappointment in your life, and different things are going to happen to you that just really, you're like, oh my goodness, there's nothing somebody can say to me that's going to make me feel better. Basically grief, and you just have to get through it, and you have to keep your head up, and you have to understand that it might not be tomorrow, it might not be the next day, it might not be next week, but you will eventually start to feel better. And I think a lot of people need to hear that message that, nobody can explain that to you. Nobody can teach that to you. It's just something you have to work through on your own and really just keep persisting.
That is awesome advice. That I'm sure that's going to touch somebody that's listening to this.
I hope so.
I think it will. Second question, how do you want the manufacturing industry to view you?
As a professional who knows what they're talking about. That is my goal.
Perfect. I like that one. And then the last one is there somebody, whether they are in your, in the past, now work with, who has influenced your professional career the most?
There's a couple. My dad, and watching him. My mom has always been a big support for me as far as, keeping me on the right path, making good choices. And my dad hasn't always made the best choices. He's been sober for 14 years, so we're doing good. But mom was really the molding me as a person and being a good person. Dad taught me really how to work hard. Mike Sayers has been huge. Kermit has been really good to me at helping me navigate how to talk to people in a sales atmosphere. And then my internship in college I did with a lady named Jean DeGudis, and she was just rough's not the right word, but tough.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
she rides a Harley. She's a tough lady, and I remember somebody was saying something inappropriate to me, and I'm just standing there. I'm not saying anything about this. I'm just letting this person talk to me. She came over to me and she's like, "Do you understand that you don't need to let people speak to you like that?" And I was like,
Okay, Jean.
No, no one ever said this to me. And I'm like, okay. And then she told that person off right in front of me. They left because they were being so absurd, and she had told them off. And she said to me, she goes, "If I ever see anyone talking to you like that again, you're getting fired from your internship." I'm like, what?
Oh my God. So she was the beginning of your rough and tough, no way attitude.
Yeah, so she made me buck up right there. I remember just feeling like I grew up that day. I was
like instant. Bang.
Yeah.
You're
I always remember that coming from another woman, just how much she really inspired me to not let people treat me however they wanted to treat me, because some people can not be nice people.
For sure. Well, those three were awesome. I think you answered them perfect, and someone is going to take something away from that. Thank you so much for being on the Manufacturing Muscle podcast. We are so happy to have you. Be sure to send the book link, all your information, MP Systems information, and the new coolant system, or the new, what is
Filtration.
it again? Filtration system. We'll put it in the description. You guys, everyone listening, thanks so much for listening. We hope you feel inspired by Sheila's story and took some tips away to apply to your career. Sheila, anything else you want to say?
I just want to say thank you for picking me to come on here, and hopefully I made everyone at the office proud, because they're always like, "What's Sheila gonna come out with?"
What's Sheila gonna do? Well, I feel like I can confidently say that you did.
I hope so. Thank you so much for having me, and I'll keep my eyes out for anyone else that is really super interesting, or and send them your way, because this is great.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much. Manufacturing Muscle, signing out.